Hey everyone, welcome. Whether you're an apprentice, a seasoned journey person, or you're just gearing up for your exams, I am super glad you're here. Today, I'm stepping into the role of your master electrician and code coach for this explainer. We're going to completely conquer Section 12 of the Canadian Electrical Code 2024, specifically focusing on the rules for cable trays. Look, whether you're roughing at a massive commercial high-rise or pulling heavy feeders in an industrial plant, cable trays are literally everywhere. Because of that, the code surrounding them is heavily tested, so let's get into it.
Now, my philosophy as a coach is pretty simple. Forget trying to memorize every single word of the code book. Seriously, it'll just make your head spin. Instead, let's look at what you'll actually build on site. Understanding the real-world application is the ultimate key here. When you understand the why behind the installation, not only are you going to pass your site inspections with flying colors, but you're also going to totally crush that Red Seal exam.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our syllabus for today. We'll be hitting navigating tray rules, installation and minimum clearances, permitted cables and fastening, joints and splices, mandatory bonding requirements, and finally, we'll wrap up with the big Red Seal exam takeaways.
All right, Section 1, Navigating Cable Tray Rules. We're grounding ourselves, pun intended, right in Rule 12.2.22, which outlines the method of installation. I want you to think of a cable tray kind of like a highway for your electrical distribution. A quick memory trick for this rule is to think, build the bridge before you cross it. The code explicitly states that this highway has to be installed as a complete system before any insulated conductors or cables are pulled. I mean, you wouldn't drive cars on a bridge that's only half built, right? Same logic. The tray absolutely must provide adequate cable support and proper bending radius first. Oh, and a really quick note from the code, these trays cannot pass through walls unless those walls are constructed of non-combustible material.
Now picture a pretty common job site scenario. You need to run a cable tray vertically straight up through a floor. Can you do it? Well, yes, but Rule 12.22 slaps us with three very strict conditions. First off, it has to be a dry location. Second, you must install fire stops in accordance with Rule 2128. And third, pay attention, because this is a classic Red Seal trap, it must be totally enclosed where it passes through and for a minimum distance of 2 meters above the floor. Why? Well, it provides essential mechanical protection so a forklift or some careless guy with a cart doesn't just smash into your exposed cables.
Moving on to Section 2, Installation and Minimum Clearances.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how heavily it gets tested. I always warn apprentices about this. Proper spacing is non-negotiable because it prevents cables from overheating and gives you the physical room you need to safely perform maintenance. So if you're stacking trays in tiers, you need a minimum of 150 millimeters of vertical clearance between them. But if you're pulling massive cables, we're talking 50 millimeters in diameter or greater, you actually have to double that clearance to 300 millimeters. You also need 300 millimeters from the top of the tray to any ceilings, heating ducts, or heating equipment. Though I should mention, short-length obstructions can be reduced to 150 millimeters.
As for your horizontal clearances, the width of the tray completely dictates the rule. If your tray is up to 1 meter wide, you need 600 millimeters of horizontal clearance on one side. But if you're dealing with a massive tray that exceeds 1 meter in width, you've got to leave 600 millimeters of clearance on each side. Now sure, out on real job sites, you might run into chases, gratings, or process pipes. The code does permit reduced clearances around those specific obstructions, but for exam purposes, burn these 600 millimeter baseline rules into your memory for sure.
All right, Section 3, Permitted Cables and Fastening.
So, we've built the tray. Now, what are we actually allowed to put in it? We're looking at Rule 12-2202. The standard requirement is honestly pretty straightforward. Cables for use in trays generally need a continuous metal sheath or interlocking armor. But there are some major industrial exceptions. In industrial establishments that are inaccessible to the public, you can use Type TC or TCER tray cable. You can also use single insulated conductors like R90 or RW90. But here's the catch with that. They cannot be smaller than 10 AWG. You're not going to be running little number 12 single wires loose in a tray. They have to be heavy-duty, 10 AWG or larger.
And when you're installing these cables, you obviously need to tie them down. 1.5 meters. That's your magic number right here. Just remember the rhyme, 1.5 keeps it alive when you're dealing with excessive movement. You must fasten insulated conductors and cables at intervals not exceeding 1.5 meters where movement could be caused by fault current magnetic forces. This is also, by the way, the maximum support interval when Type TCER cable transitions out of a tray.
Okay, here is a massive field tip straight from the code book.
When you're fastening single conductors to a tray, you absolutely must take precautions to prevent overheating at the fastener locations due to induction. The physics of electricity dictate how we do our jobs, right? If you use ferrous metal clamps on single AC conductors, you're going to create a tiny magnetic field that generates heat. And over time, that heat literally destroys the insulation. Always keep induction in mind.
Let's move into Section 4, Joints, Splices, and Connections. Under Rules 12-2204 and 12-2206, if you want to keep the site inspector smiling, you really need to follow these best practices. Yes, you can make joints and splices on feeders or branch circuits within the tray itself, but the connectors must be insulated and they absolutely must remain accessible. Do not bury your splices under a mountain of other cables. Furthermore, when your tray connects to other wiring methods, you have to ensure the cables aren't subjected to mechanical damage or abrasion, and you need to make sure that effective bonding is maintained across that entire transition.
Next up, Section 5, Mandatory Bonding Requirements. We are looking at Rule 12-2228 here. I honestly cannot stress this enough. Bonding is one of the most critical safety concepts for your Red Seal exam and, more importantly, for human life on site. 15 meters. Commit this number to memory right now. Except in a few very specific situations, metal cable trays shall be bonded at intervals not exceeding 15 meters. And remember, the size of your bonding conductor is based on the ampacity of the largest ungrounded conductor in the tray, as per Rule 10-616.
So the crucial point is, how do we actually satisfy this bonding requirement? Well, the code says a tray is deemed to be bonded if the metal supports are bolted to the tray and are in good electrical contact with the grounded structural metal frame of the building itself. Alternatively, you can actually skip bonding the tray entirely, as an exception, if absolutely every single cable contained within that tray has an interlocking metal armor or a continuous metal sheath that's permitted to be used as a bonding method.
But wait, there is a catch. If you choose to use that exception and not bond the metal tray because all your cables are armored, you must install permanent legible warning notices. These signs have to clearly read interlocking metal armor cables or continuous metal sheath cables only. And you got to place these warning notices at a maximum spacing of 10 meters.
Finally, Section 6, Red Seal Exam Takeaways.
All right, I am shifting fully into exam coach mode right now. Let's test your retention with a highly realistic Red Seal scenario. You're reviewing a blueprint and you notice a massive cable tray run. What is the minimum horizontal clearance for a cable tray that is 1.2 meters wide? Take a second. Think back to the clearance tables we just discussed.
Did you get it? The answer is 600 millimeters on each side. Why? Because the code explicitly states that when the width of the cable tray installation exceeds 1 meter, which obviously 1.2 meters does, you need that 600 millimeter clearance on both sides of the tray to allow for adequate heat dissipation and safe maintenance access. When you understand the logic, it's so much easier to remember the rule.
Okay, let's wrap up with today's Red Seal takeaways. Number 1, always totally enclose floor penetrations for 2 meters above the floor for mechanical protection. Number 2, know your 600 millimeter horizontal clearance thresholds. One side for 1 meter or less, both sides if it's over 1 meter. And number 3, unbonded trays require warning signs every 10 meters. Before we officially wrap up, I want you to think about this. As tray systems get larger and industrial plants start demanding way more power in tighter and tighter spaces, how might future code cycles have to adapt to deal with extreme thermal buildup? It's something to think about, so keep an eye on those changing standards. Thanks for studying with me. If you found this lesson helpful, please like, subscribe, and comment with the next CEC topic you'd like to learn. Keep studying, stay safe, and good luck on your Red Seal journey.